In the dusty heart of New Mexico territory, one of the most intense and chaotic gunfights of the Old West exploded in a place called Blazer's Mill. At the center of it stood a lone, wounded gunman, Buckshot Roberts, a man who didn't want to fight but went down in a blaze of bullets anyway. On the other side, none other than Billy the Kid and the Lincoln County Regulators. This wasn't your typical standoff. It was a legendary shootout that pitted one determined man against a gang of infamous outlaws, and it would leave a bloody mark on Wild West history. So holster up and step back in time as we uncover the gritty, gun-smoke-filled details of Buckshot Roberts' last stand. And if you love untold tales, violent showdowns, and true grit from the American frontier,
Andrew L. Buckshot Roberts was a seasoned buffalo hunter, cowboy, and frontiersman whose name became tied to one of the most remarkable standoffs in Old West history, the gunfight at Blazer's Mill near Lincoln, New Mexico. Unlike many tales from the frontier, often clouded by legend and exaggeration, the events at Blazer's Mill are well documented by credible witnesses. This particular confrontation stands out for the sheer determination and resilience displayed, especially by Roberts. Though he had a reputation for wanting to stay out of the Lincoln County conflict, Roberts became a target of the Lincoln County Regulators. They suspected he had a role in the death of their employer, English rancher John Tunstall, whose killing had sparked a broader conflict in the region. Among the Regulators present was Henry McCarty, better known as Billy the Kid, who participated in the encounter. The exchange, which unfolded outside a sawmill, resulted in multiple injuries and fatalities. Roberts, though seriously wounded early in the fight, managed to defend himself effectively. Regulator leader Dick Brewer was fatally shot during the incident, and several others were injured. Ultimately, Roberts did not survive the wounds he sustained. It was later determined that Regulator Charlie Bowder fired the shot that ended Roberts' life. The episode at Blazer's Mill remains one of the rare examples from the Old West where the accounts of courage, confusion, and consequence were recorded with a level of detail seldom seen in frontier history. Early life. Very little about the early life of Andrew L. Buckshot Roberts can be confirmed with certainty. Born in 1831, he reportedly served as a Texas Ranger under the name Bill Williams, although documentation is scarce. His involvement in the American Civil War is also a matter of conflicting reports. Some sources claim he served in the Union Army, while others list him among Confederate ranks. What is more consistently mentioned is that he achieved the rank of sergeant before being discharged. During his years on the frontier, Roberts is believed to have worked alongside Buffalo Bill Cody during the height of the buffalo hunting era. His nickname, Buckshot, came from a serious injury he sustained. He carried a load of buckshot permanently embedded in his right shoulder. That injury restricted his arm movement, limiting him to a distinctive shooting technique. He couldn't raise his arm above his waist, so he adapted his style accordingly, a detail often cited when describing his resilience and resourcefulness. By the mid-1870s, Roberts had settled in New Mexico. He owned a small ranch in the Ruidoso Valley, not far from Lincoln. Those who knew him described him as quiet, private, and not inclined to share stories of his past. Roberts had a solitary nature and was known for riding a mule rather than a horse, a choice that reflected both his independence and practicality. Physically, he was short and solidly built, traits that contributed to his imposing presence despite his reserved manner. His employment with James Dolan placed him on one side of the growing conflict in Lincoln County. As tensions escalated between Dolan's faction and the supporters of John Tunstall and Alexander McSween, Roberts found himself drawn into a local power struggle that would eventually place him at the center of one of the West's most memorable confrontations. Gunfight of Blazer's Mills. The event known as the Gunfight at Blazer's Mill took place on April 4, 1878. It involved a tense and ultimately fatal standoff between a group called the Lincoln County Regulators and a seasoned frontiersman and former buffalo hunter named Buckshot Roberts. The Regulators were a loose band of deputized vigilantes operating under the banner of justice for the recent killing of English rancher John Tunstall, whose death had ignited what would become the Lincoln County War. Among the men present with the Regulators that day were several individuals whose names would later become part of Western legend, including Billy the Kid, then going by his birth name William McCarty or the alias Henry Antrim, alongside Charlie Boulder, Doc Skurlock, and brothers George and Frank Coe. The group was led by Richard Dick Brewer, a man deeply invested in seeing the Tunstall case avenged. Their purpose in gathering that day was not part of an organized military maneuver, but rather to rest and share a meal at a local establishment, Mrs. Godfrey's Restaurant, located within a larger complex at Blazers Mill. Buckshot Roberts, meanwhile, had no apparent desire to be caught up in the ongoing turmoil, though some believed he had past ties to the Murphy-Dolan faction, the business rivals and political adversaries of the Tunstall camp. Most historians now agree that Roberts was hoping to quietly exit the scene. He had recently sold his ranch and was reportedly waiting to collect payment before leaving the area altogether. Blazers Mill itself was not a simple outpost, but a relatively sophisticated and industrious settlement for the time. Located in the hills between Lincoln and Tularosa in southern New Mexico territory, it was the creation of Dr. Joseph H. Blazer, a former Union Army dentist and entrepreneur. The grounds included a two-story frame house that served as the main residence, a large office building, a working sawmill and grist mill, as well as a series of adobe homes, outbuildings, corrals, barns, a post office, and a general store. It was a place of community and commerce, not one built for conflict. At the time of the confrontation, emotions among the Regulators were running high. Just 3 days earlier, they had engaged in a deadly encounter with Sheriff William Brady and Deputy George Hyman in Lincoln. With tensions still simmering, the appearance of Roberts, who was thought to be aligned with the opposition, was seen as a significant development. In addition to the men already named, others who were present that day included Frank McNabb, John Middleton, Jim French, Henry Newton Brown, Fred Waite, and several lesser-known members of the group. Their identities, though not as famous as Billy the Kid's, provide insight into the diverse makeup of the Regulators. Ranging from former soldiers and cowboys to ranch hands and idealistic young men, swept up in a violent local feud masked as law enforcement. Although the group had initially come to Blazers Mill in search of rest and food, the unexpected appearance of Roberts turned the day into one of the most dramatic and widely remembered episodes of the Lincoln County War. The complex mix of personalities, politics, and personal histories all came to a head in this remote but bustling settlement, illustrating just how quickly lawlessness and justice became blurred in the territorial American Southwest. Buckshot Roberts had no intention of taking sides in the escalating Lincoln County War. A seasoned frontiersman nearing the end of his trail, Roberts had already made arrangements to leave the region altogether. He had sold his ranch and was simply waiting for the payment to come through before moving on to quieter pastures. His goal was to avoid the political and personal vendettas that had turned southeastern New Mexico into a battleground. On the day that fate intervened, Roberts rode his mule into Blazers Mills, a remote but bustling sawmill and trading post near the Rio Tularosa. He arrived expecting to quietly collect his check from the sale of his property. What he didn't expect was to find nearly all the key members of the Lincoln County Regulators gathered nearby, eating lunch in one of the buildings. Just days earlier, these men had been involved in the deadly ambush of Sheriff William Brady in Lincoln, a move that had further destabilized the region. The Regulators were not just a group of discontented ranch hands. They were young men aligned with the economic interests of John Tunstall and Alexander McSween, whose deaths had sparked a cycle of retaliatory actions. Though operating under the guise of law, They were viewed by many as vigilantes. For Roberts, the sight of these armed figures, some barely in their 20s, brought immediate tension. He had once served as a soldier and lawman himself, and he knew how quickly misunderstandings could escalate in a place where grudges often replace legal proceedings. Frank Coe, one of the more level-headed regulators, approached Roberts and tried to de-escalate the situation. The two men sat together on the porch of the main house, speaking in calm tones. Coe urged Roberts to give up any notion of resistance, promising fair treatment. But Roberts, familiar with the way frontier justice often played out, remained unconvinced. He believed surrender might result in his death, not through any formal trial, but by the hands of those who saw him as a threat or a loose end. As the standoff dragged on, the Regulators' leader, Dick Brewer, grew impatient, perhaps feeling the pressure of maintaining control in front of his men, or concerned about losing their momentum. He instructed several of them to surround and detain Roberts. From Roberts' perspective, the sudden appearance of armed figures moving purposefully toward him confirmed his fears. Reacting instinctively, Roberts reached for his Winchester rifle. In the tense exchange that followed, both he and Charlie Bouger discharged their weapons simultaneously. Roberts sustained a serious abdominal wound, while his own shot struck Bouger's belt buckle, knocking him down and momentarily out of action. Although gravely injured, Roberts managed to retreat to the doorway of the main house, continuing to defend himself with remarkable tenacity. In the confusion, several of the Regulators were injured. John Middleton was hit in the chest, an injury that would linger for the rest of his life. Doc Scurlock narrowly avoided serious harm when a bullet grazed him. George Coe, another member of the group, was not so fortunate. His right hand was struck, resulting in the permanent loss of his trigger finger. The Regulators were stunned, not just by the intensity of the encounter, but by the resilience of a man they had assumed would be easily subdued. Eventually, Roberts' rifle ran dry. In the aftermath, Billy the Kid, a figure still more folk legend than hardened outlaw at this point, attempted to intervene. But as he rushed in, he was reportedly knocked unconscious, possibly by a blow from the butt of the rifle or during the confusion of the melee. The confrontation at Blazers Mills was not a battle in the traditional sense. It was more a tragic misunderstanding shaped by fear, pride, and the unpredictable nature of frontier justice. Wounded but still determined, Buckshot Roberts took shelter inside the main house at Blazers Mills. Though in great physical distress from the earlier encounter, he showed remarkable focus and resilience. Instead of seeking help or surrendering, he prepared for the possibility of another confrontation. He retrieved a powerful rifle. Most sources claim it was a .50-70 Government Springfield, commonly used by the military in the post-Civil War years. However, some accounts suggest it may have been a Sharps rifle, possibly belonging to a local doctor, Dr. Apple. Either way, the weapon was known for its stopping power and long-range accuracy, and it was not designed for rapid fire, but for precision. Roberts positioned himself behind the barricaded front doorway, using what little energy he had left to defend his position. From where he lay, reportedly on a mattress on the floor, he had a clear view of any movement outside the entrance. Despite the pain and exhaustion, he remained alert. The Regulators, caught off guard by the seriousness of the standoff, shifted their focus to helping their own wounded. The hope was that Roberts might surrender if given the chance to do so peacefully, but he refused to come out. As time passed and patience wore thin, the group's leader, Dick Brewer, became increasingly anxious. Brewer, known for his leadership but not necessarily for caution, was likely under intense pressure. With several of his men already injured and morale dropping, he attempted to take matters into his own hands. Moving cautiously around the outside of the house, Brewer found a concealed spot behind a stack of logs. From there, he tried to suppress any movement inside the house by aiming his fire toward the room where Roberts was believed to be lying. Roberts, for his part, remained observant despite his condition. When he saw a telltale puff of smoke rising from the log pile, an unmistakable sign of a rifle discharge. He waited for the shooter to reappear. When Brewer's head came into view again, Roberts fired a single, well-aimed shot. The round found its mark, bringing the confrontation to a definitive and tragic end for Brewer. The Regulators, now disheartened by the outcome and the loss of their leader, decided to withdraw. The encounter had taken a toll on both sides, emotionally as well as physically. What had begun as an effort to arrest one reluctant man had turned into a sobering lesson about the unpredictable nature of frontier conflict. Buckshot Roberts, having defended himself with resolve until the end, passed away the following day from his injuries. In a final, ironic twist, he and Dick Brewer were buried side by side near the scene of the confrontation. Their shared grave became a quiet reminder of how quickly the lines between right and wrong, law and survival, could blur in the American Southwest during the chaotic years of the Lincoln County War. Film portrayal. Buckshot Roberts was depicted in the 1988 Western film Young Guns, where he was portrayed by veteran actor Brian Keith. The film, while inspired by actual historical events, takes considerable creative liberties in portraying both Roberts and the surrounding conflict of the Lincoln County War. In the movie, Roberts is introduced as a hardened and experienced frontiersman, true to his reputation in historical accounts. The film accurately captures a few details about his character, including his rugged demeanor and his preference for riding a mule instead of a horse, an unusual but historically noted trait that reflected both his practicality and independence. However, much of what follows in the film diverges significantly from the documented events. Rather than being a neutral party caught in a tragic misunderstanding, as many historians now believe, the cinematic version of Roberts is shown as a determined bounty hunter. In the film's storyline, he actively tracks the Regulators, allegedly to collect a reward placed on Billy the Kid. This portrayal paints him more as a predator than a reluctant participant. After a brief exchange where Roberts calmly explains his objective, the fictional version of events escalates into a chaotic confrontation. He is shown initiating an exchange with the Regulators, wounding several of them before seeking shelter in a nearby outhouse. A dramatic choice by the filmmakers that departs entirely from the real location and dynamics of the Blazers Mill standoff. In one of the film's most intense moments, Dick Brewer, played by Charlie Sheen, encourages Billy the Kid, portrayed by Emilio Estevez, to investigate whether Roberts is still alive. Billy steps forward only to be met with gunfire from within the outhouse. Brewer is then struck in the chest during the exchange, a dramatized scene meant to evoke shock and tragedy. Historically, Brewer did die during the real Blazers Mill encounter, but the circumstances were far different. The rest of the Regulators are shown retreating after an intense exchange, and the film offers no clear resolution regarding Roberts' fate. Unlike historical records, which confirm that Roberts died the following day from injuries sustained during the confrontation, the movie leaves his ending ambiguous, possibly for narrative impact. While Young Guns captures the essence of Old West conflicts, rival factions, personal codes of honor, and the blurred line between lawmen and outlaws, it should be viewed more as a stylized interpretation than a faithful recounting of the real events. The real Buckshot Roberts, who likely sought only to distance himself from the escalating range war, was transformed by Hollywood into a cinematic archetype, the aging gunman making one final stand. As with many dramatizations of the Old West, entertainment value often takes precedence over historical accuracy. The gunfight at Blazers Mill wasn't just another skirmish in the Wild West. It was a brutal clash that marked the final stand of Buckshot Robert, forever entwined with the legend of Billy the Kid. This fiery showdown captures the fierce determination, raw danger, and unforgiving lawlessness that defined an era. As the dust settled, the echoes of gunfire and shattered lives reminded everyone that in the Old West, survival was never guaranteed, and legends were born in moments of chaos.
Please like and share if you find the video content interesting and useful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment below so as not to miss the upcoming interesting videos. Thanks for watching.